Greetings. I'm going to be talking to you today about moving from spiritual patronage to supra-patronage, one Cambodian's story. I am Lynn Thigpen and I live and work in Cambodia. We have been there for 19 years, and before that we lived in Singapore. I work with Cooperative Services International, which is the Southern Baptist NGO there, and I'm also an adjunct professor with Liberty University. So Act 1 in this story is very familiar. A few years ago, my husband and I were sharing the gospel with a precious Cambodian family over the course of a few months. I could tell they were absorbing the new ideas we presented to them, and they were chewing on the implications. And then one day, the young father and husband asked this question: if I follow Jesus, do I need to get rid of my crew Gumnai? Crew. I thought, okay, that's like the Indian guru. It means teacher. Gumnai means birth teacher. I wondered in my mind who was the person that was keeping my friend from Christianity. And I'll call my friend Samnan, which is not his real name. He watched my face, my bewilderment, and he proceeded to walk inside of his one-room wooden dwelling. He climbed up to the altar at the apex of the roof, and then he came outside with this. This is not a great photo, but it's the only one I got that day. I was honestly too shocked and too puzzled. And when he first showed the object to me, I thought, my goodness, this is what is keeping you from following the creator of the universe. In this picture, you see two of them sitting side by side with a small Buddha image just to the side. One was for Samnan, one was for his wife. They're made of white, brown, red paper, all wrapped with string. Nothing much to look at. No gold leaf, no glitz, no glamour. And I had seen a lot of images and amulets and idols and all those things in my long term overseas, but I had never seen this. And I was really stumped at its full meaning. And when my friend Samnang and I were talking about this object, I would use the word it, which is via, and he would use personal pronoun, meaning he or she, guat. So I'm like, okay, yes, a personal piece of artwork. So you can tell I was very ignorant at that time, but being a good doctoral student, I set off to research using ethnographic grounded theory. Here you can see another version of the object. This was at the home of a lady who had the most horrible form of cancer I have ever seen, one that had attacked most of her face. And in this object, you can see the inside a bit, the coconut base, and such. And I went off to explore the meanings that Cambodians ascribe to their Krugam night. I interviewed quite a number of folks, and in the process I found some repeated themes in their stories and their narratives. Oftentimes a sick person would be taken by a family member to a shaman who would make one of these objects. No questions asked. This was just what you do in these particular situations. Looking at the whole system, I could see that it was something that was rooted in ancient tradition and beliefs. It was upheld by the family and the community, and people were socialized into it from birth, into understanding the meanings of it. Many people who looked at the photo of my friend's Krugam night said that the practice was very ancient. And as I talked with more and more Cambodians, I found that the people who were given a crew, they knew exactly what the crew wanted from them. They knew when they could leave their homes, what they could do, what they couldn't do, what they could eat, what they couldn't eat. And some could not eat certain kinds of meat. Some couldn't drink alcohol. They knew the obligations. They also knew they needed to respect, honor, and trust, to worship, appease, and give loyalty. More importantly to them, the Cambodians I interviewed knew what good things were in store for them. They knew the benefits. They believed healing was on the way. They believed they were being protected when they were told not to go out of the house at a certain time. They were aware of the benefits, the protection, the health, the good luck, the feeling of peace, the direction. And so keeping the obligations was no issue because of the supposed benefits they received. Then I learned that inside the object were often two wooden sticks, and these wooden sticks symbolized a particularly powerful figure, the great Hanuman of the Hindu-based Ramayana story. Hanuman is the monkey god, the powerful son of the prince of the power of the air. One researcher in India found the worship of Hanuman these days to also be increasing. In Khmer, Hanuman, the monkey god, is referred to as Fa Om, which means grandpa monkey. So the overall effect and feeling was kind of having this benevolent grandfather looking over your shoulders. I also learned that there was one word for the object and another word for the entity. The word for the object was Somnom, Somva, which meant package and sash. And the word for the entity was the Kurunai. And as I learned in the process, this was more than just an attempt at making an art project. This was animism. And if you look closely, you can see in this massive string and paper, there's a makeshift deity here, a sash and a crown. So from my friend's point of view, the system was like being under Grandpa's watchful eye. But my point of view, your point of view, we understand something different. That entity did not have my friend's best interest at heart. My friend was dominated by the entity. Anyone in this room, however, will recognize the system of a higher power, someone with higher power and resources, the system of benefits, obligations, reciprocity. I had seen it operating all around me in Southeast Asia. I was steeped in it, boiling at times in it, in having been a patron many times. In grounded theory, you explore all the data until you arrive at a central understanding from the participants. And at this point, you might be able to guess that central understanding. Of course, my friend had a relationship with an unseen, non-human entity that had power, a power he did not have. The entity gave him things like protection, provision, a sense of safety, and in exchange, some nine gave allegiance, loyalty, obedience, honor, all the elements of patronage. Only in this form, you cannot see the patron, thus the term spiritual patronage. As I researched the literature, I found little mention of this kind of patronage. There were a few comments about patron saints. Some writers talked about divine patronage, but this is not that. Virtually no one talks about animism in this way, but the system is patronage nonetheless. Understanding animism this way is extremely helpful, especially in regard to missiological implications, which I'll discuss later. As you can see, my friend had a transactional relationship. There was reciprocity, but not a true relationship of equals. He felt like he was under Grandpa's watchful eye, but this was not num quan veros. This was not true friendship. They were forever non-human patron and human client. So no matter how much the client might feel their spiritual patron is doing them good, we know, according to Scripture, that is not the case. As in many cases of patronage, the client is really being exploited and kept in the needy situation. So the question is, we've got spiritual patronage in Act 1 of my friend's life. Act 2, spiritual patronage has all the familiar elements, all the grammar, all the standard script of social patronage. His world was filled with spiritual patronage and social patronage, both very indigenous in Cambodia. In the second act, with my friend, what would he do? Would he count our family as patrons? In Cambodia, the situation is so common that one scholar said a Khmer peasant could not exist without a patron. I have seen it over and over again. Political parties function well in this story. They give gifts, expect votes in return. Sometimes the process even backfires. Like the year one party gave the inexpensive favor of MSG, monosodium glutamate. They were scorned and labeled the MSG party. But patronage, according to Crook, was the social safety net of the ancient world. Social safety net of the ancient world. I see it in Cambodia between humans with power and not power, but I see the safety net extending beyond the social and physical to the spiritual. My friend Samnang knew instinctively to ask, if I follow Jesus, do I need to give up my Krugam night? There was a conflict in his narrative, and he needed to make a choice. Which would he choose? There was a conflict, yes, and there was another foundational problem in his story. Spiritual and social patronage operate on a quid pro quo type of transactional relationship, this thinking, I'll give to you and you'll give to me kind of reciprocity. It's the score that plays throughout the whole story, throughout this whole movie. For instance, in the Old Testament, Jacob made a vow, a sort of, if you bless me, God, I will follow you kind of vow. Quid pro quo kind of religion. A transactional relationship, not with a human or a spirit, but in the Old Testament we see it with God. We see this transference of worldview, this idea of a higher status, higher power, needy person, benefit, obligation. So the question is that many Cambodians will ask when they first believe, what do I have to do in this system? So, spiritual, social patronage, frequently sacrifices are made to compel spiritual beings to reciprocate by giving appropriate gifts. Making a gift to the gods are compelled to give back benefits to man. This is a problem. I wondered whether my friend might transfer this fundamental worldview that I was learning and saw into the narrative of becoming a Christian. Why do I say that? Listen to what a longtime Christian had to say here. A colleague, Cheryl Siltzer, says, she's an Asian American. She wrote, I was very disappointed when God did not reciprocate my good works, my 25 years of missionary service with good health, but rather with bad health, a cancer diagnosis. I thought I had enough good works that it would not result in something bad like cancer. I felt there was this great danger that my friend Samnang might try to live the Christian life the same way he dealt with his crew or the same way he dealt with any other patron in Cambodia. If my friend were to discard his crew and embrace Christ, how would he follow? Would he still hold to the same ideas behind fulfilling obligations in order to get the benefits? And my question was how I could prevent him from falling into this dangerous situation. As my friend pondered Christianity and we walked with him on this journey, we both began to see patronage throughout Scripture. And I began to look at Scripture with new eyes and how my friend Samnang might see the Bible. Their ideas, their patron-client ideas all throughout the Old Testament. For instance, this verse in Ruth, may the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Just even looking at the book of Psalms and doing a word cloud, we see God's tremendous provision and how he behaved to Israel and to his people. And how the writers responded to God's wonderful gifts to give him obedience and worship, bless, to serve, to remember, to magnify. And we know, all of us in this room, all of us studying patronage, that in New Testament times there were powerful patrons and needy clients. But when Jesus came on the scene, it seems that he completely changed the standard story, the standard grammar, the standard script. He directly attacked the patrons and the system of the day. He gave direct instructions that his followers were to operate in a completely different manner. Jesus challenged the pervasive patterns of patronage and clientage, according to Batten, and Wheatley says that Jesus denied the pattern of honor giving, for instance, in the arena of spiritual brokering, and indicated an alternative behavior, which was to be a servant. Jesus said this: the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who have authority over them are called benefactors. But it is not this way with you. The one who is the greatest among you must become like the servant. Jesus' stories in the New Testament were radical. Think of the story of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16. Who's the hero? It's not the rich man. What would my friend, steeped in social and spiritual patronage, think of this story? When the rich man would not even stoop to be a patron to Lazarus. Abraham received him. Abraham did. To a man who could not possibly repay a benefit, there was a rich welcome in heaven. How many days did poor Lazarus stand at the rich man's gate and receive nothing, while the rich man's friends and clients collected their due and celebrated and feasted? This Jesus, sent by the great patron benefactor, who Jesus may have been a broker, yes, but he actually was different. He was himself the gift, the benefit. What a rarity, what a singularity, what a once-in-a-lifetime kind of event. Who would give his most precious possession for his enemies? What kind of patron would do that? This is the stuff in which beautiful fairy tales are written. It's quite unbelievable, but it happened. And Jesus didn't just favor only a few. He favored every one of us, including my friend some 9, taking enemies like me and counting them as friends in amacorum numero, numbering us as friends. Plus, we have been adopted as sons. I maintain, forgive me, but I think it might be a bit dishonoring to call all of this a wonder in the New Testament mere patronage. He calls it radical patronage. And if we're going to use the word patronage, let us at least call it what it is. It's something more than the standard version of patronage. It was above and beyond a kind of supra-patronage. So where does this supra-patronage fit in the scheme of things? Well, in my friend's life, social patronage is the norm. It's pervasive, innate, this kind of idea that you go to someone when you need help, you seek assistance, you seek refuge, you go to others when you're in need, and you know that it's kind of quid pro quo, tit for tat, golden rule. You're going to get a benefit out of the situation. On top of that, in some parts of the world, like in Cambodia, with my friend some 9, when friends and family, important people can't meet a need, people like my friend some 9 go to non-humans, to the spirit world, to the spirits of deceased people, or to various gods with which they're familiar. Spiritual patronage. Same kind of system, but the transactions are conducted with non-humans. But beyond these two systems, there's a quite different world, one that is not operating as expected, not with a quid pro quo type of reciprocal relationship. And that's what I found that I needed to teach my friend some 9. Jesus was the gift. The gift was God himself. What do you get? What did I need to tell my friend that he would get when he followed Christ? What would entice him to leave his Krugum night? Most people entice people to follow by saying they're going to get joy or peace or salvation or forgiveness or even heaven. Yeah, we get all those things, but God, is the supreme benefit. Jesus said, I will not leave you as orphans. I will ask the Father, he will give you another helper that he may be with you forever. That is the Spirit of truth. When we get salvation, we get one benefit. We get him. Are there obligations? Yes, but we can't fulfill them, like loving God, loving other people. A lot of things in the New Testament. Like our one major benefit, I believe there's one major obligation for believers, and that's to allow the God treasure that's inside of our earthly vessels to shine through our lives. Then we can obey through the grace power, the charis He has given us. Then we are given the ability to love. Then we can love. Then we can do all the other things that Christians are supposed to do. It is Christ in us, the hope of glory. In spiritual and social patronage in the life of some 9, my friend, the story plays out like this first line: meet the expectations and the obligations, get the benefits. But in the New Testament, it's get the benefits. When we get Him, we get the ability to fulfill the expectations. It cannot be the other way around in the New Testament. And what does discipleship look like then for people moving from the first line to the second line? It has to be different. There are definite missiological implications in my friend's story. It changed the way that I shared the gospel and explained it to my friend some 9. I explained what I understood about his crew after I interviewed so many people, what the crew meant to him, about the benefits, about the obligations, about the relationship we were asking him to relinquish. And by then I realized we were not asking him to give up a thing, but a relationship, something that was precious to him, a long-time guardian spirit, someone who made him feel protected. And the relationship was like taking refuge from the sun under the shade of a spreading vine. However, I told my friend some 9, I was not aware of his worldview. I was in the dark. I was blind to his world. But that there was a world to which some 9 was blind, and I wanted to share it with him. I told him about a much more expansive system of refuge, a patron big enough for everyone in the whole world, an entirely different system, different rules. There were benefits, but no magic. We couldn't manipulate this patron. Completely different rules. The benefit was eternal. The question was, with my friend, which would he choose? There's a Southeast Asian proverb that says 2 tigers can't live in the same cave. So the answer to my friend's question in the beginning, if I follow Jesus, do I have to get rid of my crew or not? Yes. He knew he could not serve 2 masters. He could not serve his crew and Jesus. But why? There's another helpful analogy I needed to give to him to help him see what he was moving from to what he was moving to. Raj and Harman say, Western monotheistic traditions are accustomed to the idea that a person must participate in only one religious tradition at a time. We have treated religious affiliation as a form of monogamy. But the common folk among South Asian, and I would say Southeast Asian, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, Jains, and Christians, they don't understand religious adherence in such exclusive terms. The idea of spiritual monogamy, of this kind of exclusive relationship, of allegiance, of loyalty to only one patron forever. This is a novel concept for people that are involved in social or spiritual patronage because you can readily switch patrons and it's okay. Crook, I love that Crook maintained that conversion is a change in patrons, a change in patronal relationship. So this is how I shared the gospel with my friend some 9. Which patron would he choose to serve? My friend brought a lot of issues to following Christ. He brought things that were different. Spiritual patronage was quite different from Supra-Patronage, where he saw a social distance between people, whereas we have a God who draws near. He had a worldview in which the spirit world was immanent and God was not. But in our worldview, God is immanent. He had a worldview that saw tit for tat, quid pro quo kind of relationship. You give to me, I give back to you. In God's world, in super-patronage, grace rules. It's totally different. He had a worldview of limited good, whereas God has unlimited supply. He had a worldview in which you could readily exchange your patrons. God calls for surrender, for faith, for an exclusive relationship. And finally, in addition, Chin Chin in his dissertation says that long-term patronage relationships also involve the affective. My friend had a strong attachment to his crew, a strong relationship. He felt protected by the powerful grandfather monkey. And what do we do as foreigners? We come in this situation and we major on giving a lot of cognitive information as a form of discipleship. What should our form of discipleship be in reality? It should be more affective, more relational. And in this quote, I love this quote. Tiano says, as older Bobo in Africa Christians, since the end of their lives approaching, they feel more and more distant from Christ and closer to their ancestors. They return to the religions of their ancestors because they know the ancestors through kinship bonds. They do not know Jesus that way. How sad. We need to make sure people know Jesus through those sorts of kinship, affective, relational bonds, or they will fall into syncretism. So viewing animism in this way, the way that I've shared, it helped me share the gospel in terms that my friend Samnang understood. When I related to him with this foundational understanding, this transition from spiritual patronage to supra-patronage, it shows the enormity, the exclusivity of God's gift and what's expected in return. And when I shared this with my friend Samnang and his wife, they both said, this is not fair. This is not fair. We didn't ask Jesus to do this for us. I told them, whether it's fair or not, he did it anyway. He did it for you. He's the treasure. The question is, what will you do with this? Will you choose him? And this embracing Jesus is this moving away from slavery to a real relationship, from having a patron to having a papa, from being a client to being a child. Paul writes 122 times with sibling language in the New Testament. And as I shared with Samnang, I explained the freedom and the relationship that God is extending to all people throughout the world. The end of the story, what happened? For about a year, the narrative did not have a happy ending. Many people prayed with me as I shared this story, and I returned to his home last year to take another photo of his crew, as Samnang Songbai, but he no longer had it. I was surprised, and he calmly revealed he had decided to follow God. And I was shocked. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe he would let it go. I didn't believe he would surrender the relationship. So the very next day, we went to a local fellowship. He surrendered in prayer. He was baptized. And despite much opposition, they've been following Jesus ever since. Hearing his voice, reading his word, persevering. Soli Deo Gloria. This is the way God works. I would say it was not without opposition afterward, and you'll have to talk to me later about that, because the crew did not give up easily. If you have questions, please write me. Here's my my email address, wlthigpen@mac.com. And I know we're supposed to, as time runs down, we're supposed to have discussion. And I would say, here's some points that we need to think about. We need to think about how we give gospel presentation to people that are involved in spiritual patronage. We need to think about the kind of discipleship that's needed in this situation. We have to think about the prosperity gospel. And is this looking at religion with a quid pro quo kind of lens? And what do we do when people are disappointed in these quid pro quo kind of religious relationships? That's just some food for thought.